This video touches the concept of spatial scales, and we will move on to deal with spatial scales in Singapore before ending off with town planning in Singapore. So this is the final video for Geography in Everyday Life cluster, topic 1, section 1.4. So spatial scales, now you've covered this in lower secondary geography as well. In lower secondary geography, we learn about scale, place, space, as well as the environment in our consideration of geographical concepts. So once again, scales is back to haunt us, right? So technically, if you look at your textbook or you look at SLS itself, you will realize that there is a sort of a definition given for scale. Basically, it's the intensity or the extent in which a phenomena or process takes place. So you can have very small scale items or this phenomena. You can have the same phenomena in a larger scale. What it means is if the scale is small, it's less impactful. If it is large, it is more impactful. And generally, our four scales that we tend to look at in school as part of O-level geography is local, national, regional, and global scale. So let's think about it. Can we have an example of, let's say, a disease that is typically only local scale? So when you were very young, right, and you were in kindergarten, the teachers sometimes will scrutinize your hands, your feet, and your tongue. Okay, the soles of feet, your palms of your hand, and your tongue. They're looking out for symptoms of blistering or spots because that is a disease called hand-foot-mouth disease. It's very prevalent in young children in Singapore during periods of time. It tends to be a very local thing. So the spread is within the community, within the kindergarten itself. So they don't want it to start. So that is an example of a local scale disease. Now, what would be a national scale disease? When we have a flu, influenza wave that sweeps through Singapore, that would be then known as national. The entire nation is impacted by this. Okay. Regionally, if you are looking at bird flu, right? Bird flu is typically a regional disease, or you look at dengue fever, it typically is a regional disease. It affects the regions around the equator. So it's not only a Southeast Asian problem, it's actually also possible to have dengue fever in the Central America, also in parts of Africa. Right? So this is hopefully giving you an idea of region. It doesn't spread upwards, it doesn't spread downwards, it's locked within this band in the tropics because of the temperature requirements for mosquitoes to be prolific. Okay, and then global scale, the very recent past few years when we had the pandemic, okay, the COVID-19 pandemic, that would be a global scale disease. It's very impactful. It actually affects all countries. Okay, they don't respect borders. So this is what we are looking at when we talk about spatial scales. Now, of course, we're not only using this for diseases. You can use this in terms of many other phenomena. As long as it is able to scale up or scale down, you can use this idea of spatial scales.
Scale is another key concept in geography. It refers to the level at which a geographical feature or issue is examined. As geographers, we study a phenomena at various levels: local, national, regional, and global. We can better understand scale using this example. As geographers, we may be interested in studying about Singapore's weather. At a local level, we may investigate the daily temperature and rainfall levels in our school. At a national level, we may want to investigate the average temperature and rainfall levels across the whole of Singapore for a year. At a regional level, we may investigate the influence of regional wind patterns, such as monsoon, on our temperature and rainfall. At a global level, we may want to investigate how, as a tropical location, our temperature and rainfall may differ from another place that is located in the temperate region. By studying an issue or a phenomena at different scales, geographers can examine their outcomes at different levels and better understand that the spatial scales are interconnected and shaped by interactions between one another. The key geographical concepts of environment and scale, together with space and place, will help us better understand our world and the geography of our everyday life. So next time you head to school, ponder about the sights and sounds that you observe.
So this is scale. This is what we're looking for in terms of scale as a key concept, key geographical concept. This will continue to haunt you uh, if you choose to continue this journey with geography. Okay, so think about what you have learned about spatial scales. What are the examples of spatial scales that we have encountered today so far? Next up, we'll be looking at Singapore as a context in terms of spatial scale distribution in a context itself. Now, similarly, there are also local scale patterns of things that we find in Singapore, also small scale items as well as large scale items. If we take the example of um, residential areas, so you can actually map out and segregate the area into 20 towns. So what do you expect to see in the town center, right? Let's think about it. Now, I'm pretty sure most of you would have been to some town center in your time here in Singapore. Some of the amenities that you do find in town centers are not found in the smaller neighborhoods within the new town itself. So we have 20 towns here, right? Let's zoom in and take a look at some of them, right? So for example, let's take a look at Woodlands, right? Woodlands is a rather big town. You look at the surface area here, highlighted. I think the only one that's relatively comparable with Tampines in terms of absolute size. In the town itself, it is likely that you have a town center with amenities that have larger sphere of influence, which people will travel for. I'll give you an example of one of these. This may be the integrated transport hub, where you have the bus interchange, I'm sorry, together with your MRT station. Okay. Now, as you move to the further parts of Woodlands itself, you may realize that, hey, there's another MRT station in Woodlands. Actually, in total, there are about 3 to 4 MRT stations in this town called Woodlands. Now, why is this so? If you're looking at Woodlands itself, the main Woodlands MRT will be in the town center. But because of the size of the town, it has allowance and it has a need for more of these transport network facilities to be embedded in the other areas of the town. So they come in to provide further connectivity for the town itself. Now, if you're looking at smaller towns like Marine Parade at the bottom here, then you will be looking at a much smaller uh, concentration of items. Okay, so what are some of these things that you will find in terms of a town? Okay, you will find this MRT interchange, right? The much bigger malls, your sports complexes, like the things where you have your running track as well as your swimming pool. Okay, these are things that you would find at towns as opposed to the smaller areas. So what exactly are the scale denominations when we are looking at spatial scales in Singapore for residential areas? Okay, so I just want to highlight one more thing. You have this in your SLS as well. So this is highlighted as items that you will find in town centers. But I would like to remind everyone that this is a little bit dated because when you look at it, in Toa Payoh town center, you find a McDonald's. But if you think about it very carefully, a lot of us don't live in a town center, but we have a McDonald's or maybe a Burger King or maybe a KFC or maybe a Popeyes or one of these fast food joints very near us as well. It's not the town center. I repeat, it is not the town center. So why is it that in the past you could only find a fast food restaurant in the town center? Largely, the main reason is because the town center could people would travel for these things. This one more unusual, more novel. Now, in this day and age, McDonald's is part of everybody's diet. You may not eat it very often, okay, but it is not uncommon for a child to say, "Oh, let's go for McDonald's." There were times in the past where it wasn't. Okay, Maybe a better example now for a shop that you would find in the town center and not in your neighborhood would be this, right? Something like a Uniqlo or maybe an N2C Finest, an H&M, Old Days or a Donkey Store, something of this manner where you would travel a little further, right? You may not want to travel all the way down to Orchard or to Vivo or to the major shopping belts in Singapore for these facilities because you have this in your town center. Okay, so hopefully this clarifies a little. I know your slides may not have the Uniqlo image here, but it's just to trigger some more updated reference point for you. Okay, right. So how would you describe spatial skills in Singapore? What would you find in the most local area in the residential area? What would you find in the um more larger influential areas like your town centers? Will you see the same thing? Okay, so this is important. Now we're going to move on and look at this. So I need you to check your textbook for me on page 17 of your textbook. I need you to confirm that the labeling is the same as what you see in this slide here. Okay, this is how Singapore houses are distributed in terms of spatial hierarchy. Okay, so from the very most local level, the local level would be residential unit. That's the smallest unit you have. That's one home. So the house that you live in, okay, not only your room, the house that you live in is the smallest unit that's measured in terms of residential hierarchy. Okay. Now the next one is precinct. That is a few blocks of flats combined together that forms a precinct. And then a neighborhood is a few precincts combined together. So in your textbook, please check that your precinct and neighborhood are labeled correctly. If you have purchased one of the earlier prints or you're holding on to a second-hand textbook, I don't know how it's possible, but if you're holding on to a second-hand textbook, please check that it is precinct, neighborhood, and then town. And some of them have it printed as neighborhood, precinct, and then town. So check and amend your page 17 of the textbook to residential unit, precinct, neighborhood, and then town. Okay, so a neighborhood is just a few precincts joined together, and a town is a few neighborhoods joined together with the neighborhood that forms the town center. Okay, so the town center itself normally has residential units inside as well. It is actually also a neighborhood. It also has normally two to three precincts that form that neighborhood. It's just that right next to it, all the neighborhoods around it use facilities that's found in this unique super neighborhood that is called the town center. Okay, so they will have supercharged amenities, right? That's it. That's the essence of this. Okay. Now, in terms of what we see day to day, right? If you live in an HDB estate, a newer one, right, the BTO estates, your precinct is the bunch of blocks that are painted the same color. Okay, so around your block, there should be three to four. There are some very large ones that have maybe 5, 6 blocks maximum. They form a precinct. Okay. In HDB's idea, a precinct should not have more than 800 units. So it normally is between 2 to 4 blocks only, depending on how tall and how large the blocks are. Okay. Similarly, neighborhood, what are we looking at? We're looking at 4,000 to 6,000 residents in a few precincts. Now, this data here, I have it on my slide. You can scribe it onto your slide if you want to. Otherwise, if you look at your textbook, you will also see this. Okay, you will also see this. Okay. Now, how do you decide then what what are the essential things that you see in a precinct? Okay, in a precinct itself. So this will be your typical BTO clusters. So the amenities that are inside here are things that people don't want to travel for. Okay, so you don't want to travel too far away for. It's just something that you need for day-to-day living. So what will you need? Now, if you think about your typical HDB BTO cluster, you will see things downstairs in the commercial block, things like a convenience store. Okay, convenience store, very common. Clinic, very common. A small coffee shop, very common. Okay, and sometimes if you're very lucky, you get a mid-sized convenience store, a small supermarket. But these are things you don't want to travel for, and these are not just the things that you find commonly in precincts. Now, if you live in an even older HDB estate, your precinct will still have common facilities like your neighborhood gardens, your sheltered walkways, and also your playgrounds for your people to play with, the people who live in the area. I've been wondering about playgrounds, right? Why do you need a playground at the bottom of a cluster of flats, right? The main reason is because you need something to occupy your children, right? And in this case here, do you want to bring your children on a 10-15 minute walk across the many roads to get to a playground? No. So everybody needs one at the bottom of a few flats. So in the precinct level, these are the common things that you will see in your community garden, shelter walkways, and playgrounds. Increasingly, you also find sheltered car park, okay, multi-story car parks, and on top of those multi-story car parks, they actually integrate this community garden into it. When you move further up the scale into something that's a larger scale, when looking at neighborhoods which are 2 to 3 precincts, or towns which are 3 to 4 neighborhoods to even 5 neighborhoods, what are we looking at then? So in terms of these larger scale residential units, if you look at education, okay, if you look at education, what are we looking at? From the very beginning of the education sphere, right, you will have your childcare, then you will move up to primary school, then you will move up to secondary school, and then to junior colleges, and then to universities, right? Tertiary, JC, Poly, right? ITE, and then you will go further up if you want to continue the journey to university. Okay, so what will we be looking at in terms of precinct level? Precinct level, we are looking at childcare, right? Because you don't want your children to have to travel very, very far for childcare facilities, for kindergarten, and primary school as well. Within primary schools, you tend to find primary schools in neighborhoods. Neighborhoods. Why? Same logic behind it. Your children are young. You don't want them to travel too far. As we move further away, right, you move up towards things like secondary school, you still have them largely in neighborhoods. So if you look at where your school is, surrounding your school, there should still be a catchment of HDB neighborhoods. Okay, therein comes the term neighborhood school. Okay, a school that is in your neighborhood. Why is it that a lot of people tend to think of a neighborhood school as a derogatory term? Because the emphasis of the neighborhood school is proximity. It is nothing else. So if you tell someone else, oh, I'm going to the school in my neighborhood, there's a neighborhood school called XYZ Secondary School, people will retain the scale reference neighborhood. Oh, so you're going there because it's near your place, not because it's good, not because you did well, not because you did, yeah. Okay, so that is the problem with that moniker that is given to secondary schools. If you look at JCs and polys and ITEs, they may be shared between a few towns. So a few towns may then, one town is lucky enough, congratulations, you get a junior college. Okay, and because of that, that particular town has a higher amenity level in terms of education. Are there university towns? Yes, there are. If you go to Clementi, right? Clementi, Buona Vista area, you have NUS. And you go to the east near Tampines, you have SUTD. You go to the west in Jurong, you have NTU. You go to the south in the Orchard Belt, you have SMU, right? So these are even found even further away from residential areas, and they serve a very larger population. Now, why is it that your JC, Poly ITE, and university can be further away? Because basically by then you're almost an adult already. So travel isn't going to be your biggest concern. It's going to be what kind of courses you want to take, what kind of specialization you want to go for. Let us think for a minute. So similarly, while you are trying to digest this, think about what about healthcare? What kind of clinics, hospitals, specialist clinics? Where will you find them in terms of our neighborhood scaling? Okay, in terms of where you find it in the precinct, where you find it in the neighborhood, where you find it in the town? Where will you find different forms of healthcare services? So with this, we have come to the end of spatial planning, okay, spatial hierarchies in Singapore. Right, next video up will deal with town planning.